A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video about Charlie Swan and how Twilight, from his perspective, is basically a horror story. And a lot of you jumped into the comments telling me to read the books. Some of you said the horror was really more intense in the books. Some of you said I got a few things wrong, and I did. And I'm sorry. You know, you live and you learn. And some of you, I believe, maybe there's a conspiracy going on, wanted to watch me suffer, which is fair. So being your loyal and faithful servant, I said, you know what? Screw it. I bought this book. I bought it. It's right here. Right here. And right away, I have to tell you, I had a hunch that this was not going to be my thing. But I still grabbed the first book, sat down with an open mind. I need to preface that. And now I just have a lot to vent about. This was also my first time reading Twilight. I only ever saw the movies. I didn't even see the movies when the movies came out. I saw the movies I want to say a couple of years later. I was doing this whole angsty thing in high school where I'm like, I'm not part of the crowd. Which was so stupid. Hey everyone, I'm Nikanak, and I make videos about everything I question and overthink. And today I want to talk about the parts of Twilight that surprised me. What made me roll my eyes so hard I thought they were going to roll right out of my head. And why I finished this book wishing it focused on literally anyone else. So without further ado, let's get into it. I think it's only fair, I think it's only appropriate to start with the elephant in the room. The topic that deserves its own video, honestly, and that is Bella's and Edward's relationship. And yes, of course, I'm going to mention the fact that Edward spends a good amount of the book telling Bella he wants to kill her, to taste her blood, and she's like, la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. That in and of itself is disturbing, but I get it because there wouldn't have been a book if that weren't the case. But the part I really want to talk about, and what really stood out to me, was the way he treats her, even when he isn't saying things like that. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really prepared for how intense he is with her, especially in moments that should feel normal or even sweet. One of the most memorable scenes that made me stop was when Bella tries to kiss him. This is right before the baseball game, and this is how he responds.
There really was no excuse for my behavior. Obviously, I knew better by now. And yet I couldn't seem to stop from reacting exactly as I had the first time. Instead of keeping safely motionless, my arms reached up to twine tightly around his neck, and I was suddenly welded to a stone figure. I sighed, and my lips parted. He staggered back, breaking my grip effortlessly. "Damn it, Bella!" he broke off, gasping. "You'll be the death of me, I swear you will." I leaned over, bracing my hands against my knees for support. "You're indestructible."
And I just remember sitting there thinking she just leaned in, you know? She's a 17-year-old girl kissing the boy she likes. The way he reacts makes it feel like she almost set off a bomb. And because of these types of reactions, Bella learns to walk on eggshells, which is not okay, because everything she does is always with that thought in mind: how do I not make him upset or mad?
He wants me to be safe, I told myself again and again. I would just hold on to the faith that, in the end, that desire would win out over the others. And what was my other choice? To cut him out of my life? Intolerable. Besides, since I'd come to Forks, it really seemed like my life was about him. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind worried, wondering if it would hurt very much, if it ended badly.
And another thing that stood out a lot more in the book than it did in the movie was the age difference. There's this moment where Edward asks Bella's age.
"How old are you, Bella?" "I'm 17, I responded, a little confused. "You don't seem 17. His tone was reproachful. It made me laugh. "What?" he asked, curious again. "My mom always says I was born 35 years old, and that I get more middle-aged every year." I laughed and then sighed.
Bella, our girl Bella, laughs it off because her mom called her something of an old soul. But, matter of fact, she's still a teenager. She's still 17. On top of that, she's still figuring out who she is, while he treats her like someone who should already know better. And this gap becomes even clearer in the smaller conversations that they have. Edward keeps telling Bella to be safe, but the way he says it, it doesn't feel protective. If anything, it feels like he's talking down to her, patronizing her.
And you try to be safe, please. Safe in Forks. What a challenge. For you, it is a challenge. His jaw hardened. Promise. I promise to try and be safe, I recited. I'll do the laundry tonight. That ought to be fraught with peril. Don't fall in, he mocked. I'll do my best.
And then he calls her a magnet for danger, which was just insane when I read this. This made me mad. This made me so mad. Once again, maybe it's because I'm older now. Maybe it's because our views on relationships and everything has changed. While in the book and in the movie, it is framed as affection, as he cares about her this much. But in reality, the tone is a lot heavier. It feels like he is blaming her for these things.
He shook his head, rolling his eyes. Only you could get into trouble in a town this small. You would have devastated their crime rate statistics for a decade, you know. You're not a magnet for accidents. That's not a broad enough classification. You are a magnet for trouble. If there is anything dangerous within a 10-mile radius, it will invariably find you.
And Bella barely pushes back. She just absorbs it. Meanwhile, however, she's not actually doing anything reckless. Getting nearly hit by a car isn't her fault. Being followed by strangers at night isn't her fault. But Edward responds to these situations with this intense anger and guilt that Bella immediately tries to soothe.
I stared at his face in profound relief. Relief that went beyond my sudden deliverance. I studied his flawless features in the limited light, waiting for my breath to return to normal, until it occurred to me that his expression was murderously angry. "Are you okay?" I asked, surprised at how hoarse my voice sounded. "No," he said curtly, and his tone was livid. I sat in silence, watching his face while his blazing eyes stared straight ahead until the car came to a sudden stop.
And the wild thing is, and I'm gonna take a second to talk a little bit about the fandom of Twilight, is that people saw this dynamic even back then. For this video, I was doing just a tiny bit of research, and I stumbled upon a Goodreads comment. Now, I didn't verify this, so please take it with a grain of salt, but the quote goes like this: "I love the relationship between Edward and Bella. If you look past the abuse, he's the perfect guy." What? And this comment is from 2010. So readers acknowledged that behavior before, fully named it, and still romanticized it. And what I'm trying to say with this comment is that it made me realize how different this book feels when you read it 15 years later. By the end of the book, I really couldn't pretend that the relationship was anything other than toxic. Edward hovers, withdraws, warns, snaps, and Bella, unfortunately, adjusts herself to every mood swing. And once I saw the relationship through that perspective, Bella's clumsiness stood out even more. The gag with Bella's clumsiness, that was just oof. Not because being clumsy is unrealistic, but because the book uses this as a personality trait that exists only to keep her dependent on Edward. It happens so often in the book that there were moments where I thought, I can't imagine you making it from point A to point B. Like, how did Bella live prior? How was her life in Phoenix, Arizona? And let me just be clear, I'm not mocking clumsy people. I can be clumsy too at times. I'm pretty sure there's a handful of people in the audience who are watching this who can be clumsy. But Bella's version of clumsiness feels way too exaggerated to keep her in this constant state of needing help.
"Well, look at me," I said, unnecessarily as he was already staring. "I'm absolutely ordinary. Well, except for bad things like all the near-death experiences and being so clumsy that I'm almost disabled."
And the wild thing is, some of her biggest near-death moments have nothing to do with clumsiness, but Edward still reacts with this heavy frustration, and it reinforces the same imbalance. She is always the fragile thing in his eyes, even when she isn't doing anything wrong. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass here, but I think that a good boyfriend would sign up Bella to, I don't know, some kind of self-defense classes like Krav Maga. Something to teach her about the way her body moves so that she's not so clumsy all the time. And instead of telling her, no, I'll protect you forever, which is great and all, you can protect her. But this mindset also keeps Bella completely dependent on Edward. And at that point, you have to wonder if that's really about keeping her safe or keeping her small.
We were silent for the rest of the drive. I could feel the waves of infuriated disapproval rolling off of him. I could think of nothing to say.
And going back to the imbalance between Edward and Bella, it's not just in how he treats her physically, it's also in the way they talk to each other.
And so the lion fell in love with the lamb, he murmured. I looked away, hiding my eyes as I thrilled to the word. What a stupid lamb, I sighed. What a sick, masochistic lion.
It's iconic. It's cringe iconic. But what really stood out to me in this line is how effortlessly Bella embodies this metaphor. She doesn't really question it or challenge it. She just accepts herself as the lamb. The fragile one, right? The helpless one. And suddenly, this line feels less poetic for some, less cringe for me, and more like their dynamic playing out in real time. He, Edward, defines their roles, and Bella steps straight into hers without hesitation. And of course, then there's the infamous line.
So, what you're saying is, I'm your brand of heroine? I teased, trying to lighten the mood. He smiled swiftly, seeming to appreciate my effort. Yes. You are exactly my brand of heroine.
This line with the lamb combined, it created this tone of obsession rather than some kind of connection. And this whole conversation was really hard to read without seeing how uneven the whole dynamic is. Now, I know I've spent a good amount of this video talking about the things I didn't like. I think it's actually time I do talk about the things that I did like in the book. And that was the world building, the Cullen family, the little hints of history, the moments where the story steps outside Edward and Bella and lets us see the larger world behind it. Now, I didn't expect that to be the part that kept me turning pages, but it did. And the first moment that really shifted my attention and even made me go back some pages was James. Now, in the movie, just like in the book, he shows up at the very end and we really get to know who James is. But in the book, when Bella goes to see him in the dance studio, James starts talking about Alice. And everything, for me at least, suddenly got more interesting.
It happened once, ages ago. The one and only time my prey escaped me. You see, the vampire who was so stupidly fond of this little victim made the choice that your Edward was too weak to make. When the old one knew I was after his little friend, he stole her from the asylum where he worked. I never will understand the obsession some vampires seem to form with you humans. And as soon as he freed her, he made her safe. She didn't even seem to notice the pain, poor little creature. She'd been stuck in that black hole of a cell for so long. 100 years earlier, and she would have been burned at the stake for her visions. In the 1920s, it was the asylum and the shock treatments. When she opened her eyes, strong with her fresh youth, it was like she'd never seen the sun before. The old vampire made her a strong new vampire, and there was no reason for me to touch her then. He sighed. I destroyed the old one in vengeance. Alice, I breathed.
I really didn't know any of this. I definitely don't remember this from the movies. And the way that James talks about Alice, the way he frames her as the one that got away, suddenly made her feel a lot more interesting. Like she is a much larger character than the story let on. And that mystery around her character fascinated me way more than anything happening between Bella and Edward. And I also found myself wanting more in general when it came to the Cullens. I would have loved to read more about Carlisle and how he actually assembled this coven. I know a few pieces of information now, but I felt like there should have been more backstory woven into the narrative. And that might be true in the later books. It would have just been cool to read it right now. On top of that, I definitely didn't expect Esme's backstory to be so tragic. So that was interesting to learn on its own.
Did Edward tell you I had lost a child? No, I murmured, stunned, scrambling to understand what lifetime she was remembering. Yes, my first and only baby. He died just a few days after he was born. The poor tiny thing, she sighed. It broke my heart. That's why I jumped off the cliff, you know, she added matter-of-factly. Edward just said you fell, I stammered. Always the gentleman, she smiled.
So to conclude, when I finished the book, I sat there for a moment really trying to figure out how I felt about it as a whole. And honestly, I can't call the book awful. I just wouldn't call Twilight a masterpiece. I don't know if anybody has called Twilight a masterpiece. It definitely is. I will agree that it is a worldwide phenomenon. I will agree with that because it definitely took the world by storm. I would call it mid. It's not terrible, it's not incredible, it's just somewhere in the middle. It had its moments of pulling me in, and it had its moments of pushing me out. And I guess that's the irony of reading something so iconic for the first time ever this late. But what about you? What did you think of the books? Did you recently reread the books? Was it your also first time reading the books like it was for me? Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with anything I said or disagree with anything I said. Also let me know in the comments down below if the other books just as romance heavy as this one, and 2, which book gives the most backstory on Alice, Jasper, and the rest of the Cullens. And if you're still here, thanks for watching, and now remember, the important thing is to never, ever stop questioning, even me. Till next time.